What's up everybody, welcome back. So in today's video we're gonna finish up our weapon pickups. Although we did have everything working in the last video, they are not really usable in an actual game. So we're gonna make sure that at the end of today's video they are. So for example, what happens if we pick up a weapon we already have, and what if we want to make ammo pickups and things like that. So that's what we're gonna look at today. If you enjoyed the series so far, please consider leaving a like, and you're also welcome to join the Game Dev Raw Discord if you want to show off a project that you made yourself, or if you want to ask a question about a video maybe. And you can also join the YouTube channel or become a supporter by buying me a coffee on my Ko-fi page. So if you do any of those things, you will get access to the premium channels in the Discord, which will also give you a few premium downloads, which are only available to supporters. So with all of that stuff out of the way, let's start working on the weapon pickups. So first of all, there are a few things inside of the character that I want to take a look at. So we do not have an actual size for the weapon inventory setup, so right now we can add 15 or 20 weapons if we would like to. And for example, if we only have one weapon, we can still switch weapons, so it will play the switch weapon animation but not actually change weapons. So those are things that we're gonna take a look at to smooth it out. So first let's set up the size for our weapon inventory, and we need a variable for that. So let's create a new one and call this weapon inventory size. So we're gonna make this an integer, and then in event begin play we have a branch where we check if we are the server. Right after that I'm gonna drag it in and I'm simply gonna set it over here. So my weapon inventory size is going to be 3. And then we want to create a new function to set up our weapon inventory. So let's create that right away. That's going to be server setup weapon inventory. So we do not need any inputs or outputs, and we can actually make this a little bit easier if we go back to the event graph and we can disconnect the server select weapon node, and then grab all of the other ones and move them into the new function. Now we do want to use a for each loop with break here, so let's get rid of this one and let's grab the profile. So from here we're going to grab the player loadout and look for a for each loop with break. So plug this in, and the first thing that we want to do is check if we actually still are inside the bounds of our array. So we're going to grab a branch over here, plug it in, and we're going to check if the array index is equal to our weapon inventory size. So let's do equal and drag in our new variable. So if this is true, then we are actually outside of our array bounds and we want to break the loop. So we do not want to add any other slots to our inventory array. So this actually needs to be connected to the true pin and then break the loop. So if this is false, we want to add a slot to our weapon inventory. So let's drag off the array element and plug that into the comparison over here. So we want to make sure that there's actually a weapon inside the loadout in this slot. So let's plug this into the false pin. And then if the slot is empty, then we're gonna set the array element. And if it's not empty, so if this is true, then we're simply gonna add the weapon to inventory. So we can keep this node, but we need to plug in the array element for the weapon row, and we're going to grab the index for the index from the inventory. And if the slot is actually empty, we're going to drag in our weapon inventory names array, and then simply set an array element. So hook this up, make sure that we grab the index from the array again, and then we simply want to set it to an empty slot. So let's type empty in here and make it size to fit. So this will make sure that we have an array set up for our inventory, and if there's no weapons in that current slot, it will be named empty. So let's grab a return node and go back to the event graph. So after we set the size, we can drag in our new server set weapon inventory, plug it in here, and then we simply want to select the weapon after that. So we can plug this back in, and we want to use our current weapon index. So that's the active weapon index. We can plug it in here. So the first time we're loading, this should be 0, so this should work. And to make sure, we could drag in a setter over here. So we probably don't need it, but you never know. So with that good to go, we can start looking at the weapon switching. So we're actually going to create a new function for that as well to check if we actually can switch weapons. So let's create a new function again and call this can switch weapon. So I'm going to grab my notes quickly. We're not going to give this an input, but we're going to give it 2 outputs. So the first one is going to be a boolean, and that's can switch weapon. And then for the second one, that's going to be an integer, and that's the slot to switch to. So turn this one into an integer. Now we're going to need a little bit of room in here, so let's create that. And by the way, we also want to make local variables for these. So let's drag off here, create a local variable, local can switch weapon. And do the same thing for the slot to switch to. So local slot to switch to. Nope. So we have those set up and good to go. Now let's start the actual function. So let's go back to the beginning. We're going to grab our active weapon index. And we're going to set our local slot to switch to that. So let's drag in a setter and plug that in. Then we're going to grab our local slot to switch to again, and we're going to increment the int. So simply add 1, plug it in. Then we need to make sure that we're still inside of our weapon index array bounds. So we're going to grab a branch in here, and we're simply going to check if the slot to switch to is equal to our weapon inventory size. So let's grab a greater than or equal to, and we can plug in our weapon inventory size over here. So we already incremented the int, and after that we added the check, so we do not need to worry about subtracting 1 from the array size. This should work. So if this is true, we want to make sure that we set the local slot to switch to back to 0. So we actually made it to the top of our array, and we're going to go back to the first index again. And if it's false, we can simply continue. So let's grab a second branch in here. And for this branch, we want to check if there's actually a weapon in this slot. So we're going to grab our weapon inventory names array, and then grab a getter. And we want to get our local slot to switch to. So plug this in here. And then we're going to grab an equal. And we want to know if this is empty or not. So let's type in empty and plug this in over here. So let's do the false branch first. So if it's actually not empty, we do need to make another check. So we're going to grab another branch in here, plug that into the false bin. And in this case, we want to know if our local slot to switch to is equal to our active weapon index. So we're going to grab an equal and drag in our active weapon index again. So plug this one into the condition as well. And this can actually happen if we only have one weapon and the other 2 slots are empty. So we're going to switch. The first slot is empty. So over here, we're going to grab... let me double check. So if it's... yeah. So the first slot is empty. So it's going to go to the through branch. And we're going to make this a loop. So it's going to loop back to the beginning. Add another int. The second slot is empty as well. And then for the next slot, we're going to go back to 0 again. And in there is our pistol, for example, if we only have the pistol. So then this will be false, but we made a full loop through our array. So although we have a weapon that's not empty, we cannot switch weapons because we only have one. So we're simply going to drag in our can switch weapon array over here, or the boolean, sorry. And if this is true, we cannot switch weapons. And if this is false, we can switch weapons. So the lower one, set it to true. And we can plug this into our return node. So then this branch is done. Like so. So then we want to go back to the check for the empty slot, and over here, when this is true, we're going to grab this check and paste it over here as well. So technically this could not really happen, but you never know. Let's make sure that we check for it anyway. So if this is false, we're going to go back to the beginning and plug this into our increment int. So we're going to check the next slot. So make sure that it's nice and tidy. And if this is true, then we can not switch weapons. So we can actually copy and paste the bool over here and plug this back into the return node. And now this should be good to go. So this will also take in empty slots into account. So for example, if my slot 0 has a weapon, slot 1 doesn't, and slot 2 does, then I'm simply gonna switch to slot 2 immediately and skip the empty slot. So this should be good to go. So let's compile it and go back into our event graph, and we want to change our switch weapon events. So over here we have the input action switch weapon, and we're gonna get rid of everything after the branch over here. So let's grab all of this stuff and simply delete it. So we're actually doing this inside of the... Oh really? It doesn't let me delete it. Freaking... Sometimes this program is just awesome. So let me try again. And there we go, it's gone. Thank you very much. Where were we? So we got rid of the stuff in the switch weapon event, and then we can actually drag in our new function. So let's drag in our can switch weapon. We want to plug this into the false pin. So if we're not already switching weapons, then we're gonna grab a branch, plug this in over here. And if this is true, then we can switch weapons. So we can call our switch weapon event and simply plug in the slot over here. Now there's one thing left to do in here. We removed the setter for the isSwitchWeapon boolean, and we're actually gonna set this inside of our multicast switch weapon. And that's because we're gonna call this when we pick up a weapon from the ground. So we're actually skipping all of these events and we're calling the multicast directly. So if we have the bool in here, that'll make everything work again. So let's grab our isSwitchingWeapon boolean. And right at the beginning of the multicast, we're going to set this to true. And then when the montage is done or interrupted, it will be set back to false. So we should be good to go over here. And so I think we have most of the stuff in the character done for now. Let's start setting up the actual weapon pickup. And the first thing we're going to do is open the structure. So in here we're going to add a new boolean to tell if this is an ammo pickup or not. So let's add a new boolean and call this isAmmoPickup. So with the boolean in place, we want to open the data table and make sure that we set this up as well. So right now I only have one pickup in here, that's for a weapon, so we can leave this one to false. And I'm actually going to duplicate this one and create an ammo pickup as well. So I'm simply going to give it the prefix ammo and then rifle, but it doesn't even really matter. That's just for your own sake, so you know what you're doing. So we can set it up. We can change the name, call this something like rifle ammo. So this will appear above the pickup in the level. We do not actually need a skeletal mesh because I'm going to use a particle system for that. And then for the actual mesh scale, that's 1, that's fine. We want to show the pickup name, so the offset is fine as well. For the interactable hint, we can actually get rid of that. So we're going to make this an auto pickup, and then the interactable hint won't show anyway. And we also want to make sure that it's an ammo pickup, so also enable that one. So with this in place, we can start setting up the pickup again. So let's open up the blueprint child for the weapon pickup, and we're going to add a few variables in here. So let's see. Yeah, we do not have a whole lot going on yet. So first of all, we want to add a saved pick weapon boolean. So let's call this saved pickup weapon or picked up weapon. So this tells us if we pick up this weapon, do we actually want to save it to our player inventory, or is this simply a weapon that we pick up in the level and is not saved, so it's only here for this level. So we can keep this as a boolean, that's fine, and we want to make sure that this is instance editable and exposed on spawn, so let's enable those two. Then we're going to add another boolean, and that's the isAmmoPickup boolean. So this simply tells us if it's an ammo pickup. This doesn't need to be instance editable or exposed on spawn, so this is good to go. And then we need two integers, so the loaded ammo clip, that's an integer. And we're going to make this one exposed on spawn and instance editable again, and do the same thing for the next one, and that's the loaded ammo stock. So if we pick up a weapon, we can actually define how much ammo is in the weapon, and the same thing for the ammo pickups. So that's what these variables will do. So with this in place, let's go into the viewport, and I'm going to add a particle system for my weapon fx. And then simply check the isAmmoPickup boolean. So if it's not an ammo pickup, then I'm going to remove the particle system again. And I'm actually using a particle system from the shooter game. So not from Lyra this time, but from the old shooter game example. And in here I grabbed the weapon pickup particle system, or actually the ammo pickup. So for the component, let's add one, and that's simply a particle system, so it's not a Niagara one, but if you have one, you could choose to use that one as well. So I'm gonna leave it empty. No, it's not even really needed. We can simply assign it. So let's assign our particle system, and that's called ammo pickup. So it's simply rotating bullets, and that looks okay to me for now. So with this in place, we can go to the construction script and set up the actual pickup. So over here we have a parent construction script, and this is the child blueprint. So first we're going to make sure that it actually executes all of the construction script from the parent. So this will actually happen. And then we're going to add some stuff to it. So if you want to simply override it, you can get rid of this node, or if you want to do something before it, you need to do it before, obviously. So this simply calls the construction script of the parent. After that, we want to get a table row name, table row. And for this, we can plug in our pickup row name. And that's actually on the parent blueprint, so it's not in the list over here, but we can get it. So if we right click and simply get our pickup row name, then it will be in the variables in here. So plug it in, and we want to get our pickup info table over here, so we can break the out row. And the only thing we're really interested in over here is our isAmmoPickup, because we did all the other stuff in the parent blueprint. So let's grab a branch, plug that into the row found pin, and plug in our ammo pickup. So if this is true, then I'm going to simply destroy the skeletal mesh component, because we don't need that one. And we can also destroy the skeletal mesh component, by the way, because we don't need that one either. So let's destroy component, plug both of them in here, and then if this is false, we're going to destroy the particle system component. So plug this one into the false pin and plug in our particle system. So if it's a weapon pickup, then we are removing the particle system, and if it's an ammo pickup, we're removing the meshes. So that's done, and then we should be good to go in here, and we're going to start creating the actual pickup functionality. So right now, inside of our pickup event graph, we are simply adding the weapon to our weapon inventory array, and we're not checking anything. So like I mentioned before, we can simply keep adding weapons, although we did set up a maximum inventory size. It's not taking it into account right now. So we're actually going to create a function to take care of everything in once. So picking up ammo, picking up a weapon that we already have, picking up a new weapon, etc. And to do that, first we want to create one more function inside of our base character. So let's open that one first. And in here we're going to create a function called server find weapon slot, or find weapon slot without the server. That works as well. So find weapon slot. It actually runs on the server, but that doesn't really matter. So what this function does, we're going to plug in a weapon row name, and this will check if we actually have the weapon. If we have it, it will return the slot where it's in. And if we do not have it, then it will return the first empty slot. So let's give it the input, and that's a weapon row name. And that's going to be a name variable. And let's take care of the outputs later. So first we're going to grab a branch over here, and we're dragging in our weapon inventory array. So the weapon inventory names. Drag off here and type find. So we're going to find the weapon row name from the input. So this will return the index where this is at, and if it's not in the array, it will return -1. So over here we can actually grab a smaller than or less than, and if this is less than 0, that means that we actually have a new weapon, and if it's not less than 0, so if it's 0 or bigger, then it's already in the array. So let's create a local variable, and we're going to call that local is owned weapon. Local is owned weapon. So if this is true, then it's actually a weapon we do not own yet. So we're going to set this to false. And if this is false, then we actually have the weapon already. So we're going to set this to true. And with that out of the way, we can actually add a new local variable, and that's going to be the slot where we want to add the weapon. So let's call it local slot to add weapon. Local slot to add weapon. And this is an integer. So if we do not have the weapon, then we're going to drag this in and set it to our current weapon slot. So that's our active weapon index from the variables. Plug it in over here. And the other way, if it's a new weapon, then we're simply going to drag in the slot to switch, slot to add to again. And from this we can plug it into the find node over here. So then we know in what array index this weapon is stored. So plug it in, and that should be good to go. Now from that lower pin we can actually already go back to the return node. So let's do that. Let's grab a return node. And in here we want to return our inventory slot. So that's the local slot where we're going to add it. Local slot to add weapon, plug it in. And we also want to know if we already owned it or not. So we're also going to return the is owned boolean, but I'm going to flip it around. No, I'm not going to flip it around. I'm sorry. So we're simply going to plug it in, and that's good to go. Let's change the names over here. There we go. Okay, so that's the first and simple branch done. Now let's go back to the beginning, or we're still at the beginning. And over here we're gonna grab a branch. And in this case we want to check if the slot to add weapon is greater than or equal to our inventory size. So let's make sure that we're actually inside of the bounds of our array. And this doesn't really make sense because first we need to increment it. So sorry, let's disconnect it, grab the slot to add weapon, and we're going to increment the int. So we're going to do the same thing as we did in the previous function for the can switch weapons. So plug it in, and then we're going to plug in the branch and check if this is equal to our weapon inventory size. So drag that one in and make sure we connect up the condition. So if this is true, we want to start from the bottom. So we're going to drag the slot to add weapon and set it to 0. And if it's false, we're not going to do anything. Then we're simply going to find the weapon slot. So let's grab a branch in here. We're not going to find it. We're going to check if it's empty. So plug this in. Grab our weapon inventory names array again. And we're going to get whatever is in our local slot to add weapon. So let's grab an equal over here. So if this is empty, then we can add the slot, or we can add the weapon over here, and we do not need to keep searching. So if this is true, then we can set a local variable. Local is empty slot, and make this a boolean. So if this is true, we want to set this to true over here as well. And then we're going to grab another branch and plug both of the pins in here again. So if it's an empty slot and or it's an owned weapon, so let's drag in local is empty slot and grab an or boolean and drag in the local is owned weapon. So if we already had it, or if we have an empty slot available, then we are good to go. So we can actually return immediately. Where is my return node? Over here. So we can, let me double check if this is true. We do not need to do anything, so we can return, and then we have the slot set to the correct index, and we have the owned weapon set as well. If this is false, then we actually want to check if we made a full loop or not. So we're going to grab another branch. And we are simply going to plug in the local slot to add weapon compared to our active weapon index. So that's the index where we started at. So let's grab an equal, plug in our active weapon index again. Plug it into the condition. So if this is true, then we made a full loop through our inventory array and we do not actually have an empty spot or have the same weapon. So we're going to plug this back in here. And that means that it's simply going to replace the current weapon that we have in our hand. So it's not going to put it in an empty slot. It's not going to add it to a weapon that we already have. So it's not going to add the ammo, but we're going to replace the current weapon that we have. And if this is false, then we can check for the next index in our inventory if we can maybe add it there. So we can plug this back into the increment int and make sure this looks a little bit cleaner. And then this should be good to go. Double checking my notes quickly. Yes, this should work. So with this function in place, we can go back to our pickup, so the child blueprint, and in here we're going to create the actual function for picking this up. So let's create a new function in here, and I'm simply going to call this pickup. That should be fine. So I'm going to give it one input, and that's the player. So that's our hero base character. BP hero base, and we're going to need some outputs as well, but this is going to be a pretty big function, so let's deal with it later. First of all, we want to drag off our player and we want to call the find weapon slot function that we just created. So for the weapon row name, we can drag in the variable weapon row name to add. Then we are going to store this to a local variable, so promote it local weapon inventory slot. Weapon inventory slot, and we also want to promote a boolean, so let's just drag off this one, promote the local variable, local is new weapon, and then I'm going to disconnect it, and first I'm going to put a not bool in between here, so not boolean, and then we can plug it in. So if it's not an owned weapon, then it's a new weapon. So we have that stored over here. Now let's grab a branch in here. The first thing we want to check if we are a new weapon and an ammo pickup. So that means that we are ammo for a weapon that we do not have. So in that case, we're not going to pick this up. So let's grab our local is new weapon boolean. And we're going to grab an end and plug in the is ammo pickup from the normal variables. Plug this in over here. So if this is true, then we cannot pick up this item. So we're going to create another local variable, local is item picked up. There we go. So if this is true, we want, oh, this needs to be a boolean, by the way. So is item picked up, turn it into a boolean. So if this is true, we cannot pick up the item. So we're going to set this back to false, or not back, but we're going to set it to false. And let's worry about this later. Then let's go back to the other one. So we can set this to true if the branch returns false. And then we want to grab our table row. So get table row. And we want to grab it from our weapon info table. So not the pickup, but the weapon. And we're going to plug in the weapon row name to add. So from here, we want to get some ammo variables. So let's break the structure over here. So we have that ready and good to go. Now we're going to grab another branch, plug this in over here. So first we're going to check if this is a new weapon and if it's not an ammo pickup. So grab in the new weapon boolean, grab an end, grab in is ammo pickup and add a not bool at the end here. So not boolean, plug that in. So this means that it's an actual weapon that we do not have. So we want to plug this in and then we want to call our server add weapon to inventory event. So we can get the player from the input pin over here. Let's simply right click and get player. So we can grab the variable like that. And then let's see, we were over here. So we're going to call our server add weapon to inventory. And then we can simply grab the local variable, so the local inventory slot, and use the weapon row name to add for the weapon row name. So we're going to do this if this is true. So we're actually adding it to our weapon inventory names array. Then we want to grab another branch in here. And in this case, we're going to check only if this is a new weapon. So let's grab our is new weapon boolean, plug it in here. So if this is a new weapon, then we actually want to set the ammo values to a different value. So first we need to create some local variables for them again. I know there are a bunch of them. So we're going to create the local current clip. And that's an integer. And then let's duplicate it, and that's the local current clip maximum. And we're going to do the same thing for the stock. So local current stock and the local current stock maximum. So if this is a completely new weapon, we're going to drag in the local current clip and simply set it to 0. And then the clip max, plug it in and grab the variable from the data table. So that's the ammo clip one. And then for the stock, we're going to set the current stock to max. And again, for the maximum clip, for the maximum stock, we're going to grab it from the data table. And if this is a weapon that we already have, we need to make sure that we grab the values from our actual arrays on the character. So let's copy all of these nodes, plug them in here. And then we can simply grab the player from the input. And we're going to get the ammo clip array, for example. So get ammo clip. And then we can get it from the local weapon inventory slot. So get and plug in our local weapon inventory slot. So over here we have the find node. We had the find node in the find weapon slot, and if it's a weapon we already had, it will tell us in what inventory index it is. So this should work. So we can plug the return into this, and then we want to do the same thing for the ammo clip max and for the stock max. So let's drag off the player, get ammo clip maximum in this case, and get rid of the other one. And hook everything back up. And we're going to do the same thing in here. So get ammo stock. And hook everything back up. Oh, really? And then for the maximum stock. So we could have actually grabbed these from the data table as well, but well, whatever. Okay, so we have this set up. Then let's make sure that we add another branch in here. So we're going to check our loaded ammo clip value, and if this is set to -1, then we are actually going to set the ammo clip to full. So that way you don't have to know the maximum values for each weapon by head. If you want the weapon to be full, you can simply type -1, and otherwise you can specify the amount of ammo that you want in here. So let's set this to -1, plug it into the condition. If this is true, then we're going to set an array element. So we can grab our player ammo clip from here, for example. Paste it over here and simply set array element. And we want to make sure that the clip is full. So in this case, we can grab in our weapon inventory slot for the index, and for the item, we can grab the current clip maximum simply from the local variables. So this shouldn't need a size to fit, so that should be good to go. Now let's continue with this first branch over here. So we're going to add another branch again. And this time we're going to check the loaded ammo clip. And if that's -1, we're going to do the same trick. So then it's going to be full, and otherwise we're going to use the amount specified in here. So let's drag in the loaded ammo stock. And then we want to set the array element for the loaded ammo stock. So let's copy all of this stuff and get the ammo stock from the player, that is. Plug it into the set array element, and this time we want to use the local current stock maximum and simply plug that one into the item. So that should be good as well. Now let's do the lower branch. So if we actually want to use the variables values defined in the variables, so then we're also going to set an array element. So we can copy all of this except for the current clip maximum, paste it over here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab our loaded ammo clip. So that's actually, let me see, over here in the normal variables. From here, we're going to add the current clip, so that's the local variable. Plug it in here, and then we need to make sure that we're not actually exceeding the maximum amount of bullets in the clip. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab a minus node from here. So subtract, and we're going to subtract the maximum clip amount, so local current clip maximum. Plug this in here. So the result from this, we do not want it to be negative, so we're going to drag off here and do clamp integer. So for the maximum, I don't really care. I'm simply going to smash some 9s, and for the minimal, it should be 0. Then we're going to promote this to a new local variable, and that's the local clip overflow. So local, promote to local variable, local clip overflow. So in here are the amount of bullets that are that not fit in the clip. So if we want to put more bullets inside here than can actually fit, this will be inside of this integer. And if there's not, this should be a negative number, but we made sure it's not, so we can actually check stuff like that later. Now we can drag off the add node here, and we're also going to clamp this one. So clamp integer. And this time we're not worried about the minimum, but we're worried about the maximum. So we're going to drag in the current clip maximum as the max over here. And then the return value is going to be the item for the set array element. Now make sure that we plug in the actual setter for the overflow as well. So after that we can go to the next branch to check the ammo stock value. And in here we're actually going to do similar stuff. So let's grab the set array element without the maximum stock value, paste it in here. And in this case we can simply add all three variables together. So we can grab our loaded ammo stock and we can simply add. We're going to add two things to it. So first of all, the let me see, current stock, so local current stock, and then our local clip overflow. So we made sure this is not negative, so we actually don't need to check it. We can simply add it and that should work. We do want to clamp this again, so clamp integer, and we want to clamp it to the stock maximum, so plug that one into the max, and that's the item for the set array element, and then that should be good to go as well. So after we added ammo, we want to make sure that we update the HUD if needed. So if this is a weapon that we actually have currently selected, or if we pick up a new weapon, we're gonna switch to that weapon. So we want to make sure that the ammo values in our HUD are correct. So we're gonna use another branch in here, and first we're gonna check if this is an ammo pickup. So if it is, we need to update the HUD probably, but we're gonna add an OR check here first. And if this is a new or not a new weapon, so let's drag in the local is new weapon boolean, and let's grab a not bool. So if it's not a new weapon and it's not an ammo pickup, so let's grab the ammo pickup as well, and let's copy the not bool. So we're going to add an AND node over here, and then we're going to plug the AND node into the OR boolean. So if it's an ammo pickup, or it's not a new weapon and not an ammo pickup, and then we're going to add another AND over here to make sure that the slot that we have selected is this weapon slot. So we're going to grab in the local weapon inventory slot, and we want to compare this to our player active weapon index, so we can get the player from the input of the event, and then simply get the active weapon index, plug this in over here, like so. So if this is true, then we actually want to update the HUD, and if this is not true, then we don't care. We can do it later. If we switch to the weapon, it will automatically update, for example. So let's grab our player reference in here again, and from here we are going to call our HUD update function. So we already have those in place. We can simply call client update HUD clip and do the same thing for the stock. So in the case we are the server, we can actually call these events as well. So we don't really need to be a client. I'm sorry if I'm screwing this up. Forget about what I said. We are the server anyway, so this should work. And we want to make sure that we plug in our ammo clip and ammo stock arrays, and we can copy them from here. So let's get the player ammo clip and the player ammo stock, copy those, paste them over here, and plug them in. So that should update our HUD as well. And then there's really only one thing left to do, and that's grab another branch over here and plug everything in again. And this time we're going to check if this is a new weapon and not an ammo pickup. So let's grab our local is new weapon and grab the ammo pickup with a not boolean. So if it's actually a new weapon, then we want to make sure that we switch to this weapon. So I'm going to plug this in, and if this is true, I'm going to call the multicast switch weapon on the player. So let's grab the player again and call my multicast switch weapon event, and simply plug in the local variable for the weapon inventory slot. And then that should work as well. So now we can finally grab our return node over here, plug everything in, and for the return node we actually want to return the local is item picked up boolean. So let's grab this one and plug it in. So we want to know if this is an ammo pickup that's automatically picked up, but we don't have the weapon, then we're simply going to walk over it and nothing's going to happen. So we do want to make sure that we go all the way back to the beginning where we left this branch untouched, and we need to plug this one directly into the return node. There we go. Okay, so that should do it for the pickup function. Now we can go back into our event graph and actually change this up entirely. So let's get rid of all of this stuff. Okay, except for the interface node. There we go. And then we can also delete our slot to add variable because we're not using it over here anymore. So we're going to drag off our player character. No, we're simply going to drag in the pickup event and we're going to plug in our player character. So that's how that works. And then we're going to grab a branch over here, plug in the return value, and if this is true, we want to destroy the actor. And if it's false, we're not going to do anything. So this should work already. So I think we have a few loose ends to tie up in other blueprints and then we should be good to go. So we need to make sure that if we want to save the pickup to our weapon inventory, that we have stuff set up for that as well. So let's go to the framework folder and open our shooter player controller. And in here we're going to create a new function to save the weapon. So let's call it save picked up weapon. And we're going to give this function one input, and that's the weapon row name. Weapon row name, so that's a name variable. And we need a local variable as well, and that's our local inventory. And that's actually an array of names, so names, and turn it into an array. Now the first thing we want to do is grab our player profile, so we simply have it in the variables over here. We're gonna break the structure and we're gonna grab our player inventory from here. So we're gonna store this in the local variable. So let's drag in a setter, plug this in over here. And that should be good to go. So then we want to drag off this local variable and we want to add a unique row name. So for this we can use the weapon row name from the input. So let's plug that in over here. And then we want to add a branch in here. So if this is added to the array, it will actually return the index where it's added. And if the item is already in the array, it will return -1. So from here we're going to drag off and look for greater than or equal to and plug this into the branch. So if this is greater than or equal to 0, it was actually added to the array. So then we're going to save our save game. So first we need to change our player profile. So let's drag in the player profile again and we're going to set members in structure. Set members, and in this case we want to expose the inventory. So grab this one and we can simply plug in the local inventory and that should update the structure. So then we want to know if we are the server or not. So we're going to call this from our pickup, and that should actually be the server, by the way. Well, let's make sure we add a check anyway. So if we want to call this from a menu or something, then that would still work. So we're going to grab our has authority check. And if we are the server, we can simply set our player profile. So we're going to drag it in, plug it in here, and then grab the out struct over here. So this is a replicated variable, and then it will replicate to the local controller as well. And if we are a client, then we can simply call our server set player profile event, and that's the one we're actually using in the event graph on begin play to do the same thing. So we can simply call that and again plug in the structure, and that will make sure that the server replicates it. Then we're going to grab our save game, and in the save game we're going to update the player profile. So set profile, set player profile, plug in both branches, and then we're going to plug in the player profile from the controller. So that's updated as well. And then we need to save the game to slot. So let's drag off the save game again and save game to slot. And we need to make sure that we grab the slot name from our game instance again. So we're actually using the same slot. Let's see, those aren't save games. So the profile, and that's my player profile slot over here. So I'm not going to use a variable, I'm simply going to paste it in here, and that should be good. So then we can grab a return node for here. And we want to go into the event graph. And we're actually going to call this on the owning client. Okay, I know why. So obviously that makes sense because the save game is locally only. So we need to make sure that we're actually on the local player controller to be able to access our save game. And because we're going to replicate this to the local client, we need to make sure that we are the server if we set this. So obviously the server also has a local version, so we can be the server, but we can also be a client. So it does make sense. After all, I just kind of got lost while we were making it. So we're going to create a custom event on the event graph, and we're going to call this save picked up weapon. And that's actually the same as the function, so let's add a dash in here. And then for this one, we're going to set it to replicate on the owning client, and we want to call our save picked up weapon function and simply plug in the row name, and then that should be good to go. So let's make sure that we actually say something like client in front of this, so we know the difference between the function and the event. Okay, so that should be good to go. Then we want to go into our pickup to call this. So let's go into child for the weapon pickup, loot, and in here we have the pickup event, and we want to add a small branch in here because I don't think we have enough in here yet. So let's just keep going. And we want to check if we want to save this weapon or not. So let's add it right before the return node and move over all of these pins. No, that's actually not a good idea because this pin doesn't need to be involved. So what we can do is go right over to this branch and then move these pins over and simply create some room in between here. So that's a better idea. So for this branch, we want to check if we actually want to save this pickup, and we have a boolean for that. So we're going to drag in the save picked up weapon boolean. And we also want to make sure that it's not an ammo pickup. So if we pick up ammo, we're not going to save the weapon, obviously. So let's drag in the ammo pickup and grab a not boolean and then plug this into the end node. And if this is true, we want to call the new function that we just created. So first we need to grab our player. And from the player, we're going to get our player controller. So that's the shooter player controller. And from here, we can call our client save picked up weapon event. And that's actually the replicated event, not the function. So that's good to go. And we want to plug in the weapon row name to add in here. And then we can keep going to the next branch. Okay, so that's good to go as well. Now there's only two minor things to set up in the HUD and the player profile, and then we're good to go. First let's take care of the loadout widget. So let's go to the widgets folder, the loadout menu, and in here we need to go to the create all inventory buttons function. And what we are doing in here are multiple things that are not really working. So first of all, we're storing the player loadout, but we also actually need the player inventory. And right now we're not using any of that because we're simply grabbing our weapon info table. And for each row in the table, we're adding a weapon to our loadout menu. So we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to get rid of this and we're going to actually use our inventory and loadouts. So we can keep the player local loadout, but we want to add one for the inventory. So let's do that first. Local player inventory. And make sure that we hook it up over here. And then we can simply plug this into the for each loop and make sure that we loop through our player inventory. So the local player inventory, we could plug this in as well, by the way. And then there's only one thing left to change in here, and that's actually all the way at the end for this for each loop. So we have the loadout. Oh, we don't actually need to change it because we already have the loadout plugged in. Okay. So then this is good to go. That wasn't too bad actually. So we made sure we're actually using the inventory array this time. And then the last thing we need to do is go to our save data folder and inside our player profile structure. So we did add one empty slot to our weapon inventory array, but it makes more sense to actually add the pistol in here. So that way we always have a pistol to choose from. So fine, that should be good as well. Now I'm going to open the save game and we need to recompile this to make sure that the defaults are actually in here as well. So this should say pistol now, and it does. First of all, let's add some pickups to the level. So let's open up the level and grab a viewport in here. And let's go to the loot folder. So I'm gonna drag in a few weapon pickups. First I'm gonna set this up. So the weapon row name to add, for me that's the AR. And I want to save this to see if this is working, and then I'm not gonna put too much ammo in here so I can see if it actually stacks. So 10 on 10. And for the pickup row name, that's actually going to be the rifle. So I'm gonna add like 3 rifle pickups, and then I'm gonna duplicate them and also add 3 ammo pickups. So let's move them a little bit in front. And I'm simply gonna change the pickup row name to ammo rifle. So that works. Now we have ammo pickups for those. So we could disable the saved pickup weapon, but that doesn't really matter. It's not doing anything anyway for an ammo pickup. So we can save it, and now we can have a little look to see if this is working. So let's launch a 2-player game. And first of all, I'm going to reset the profile. So that should make it so there's no weapons in the inventory to start with. So let's have a little look. Select weapons. We have a pistol and we do not have any primary weapons, not in the inventory and not equipped. So that's good. Now let's see if we go in game. So I cannot switch weapons right now. I only have a pistol, so that should be good. Now we have our pickups here. So let's pick up one of the rifles. And that's actually not working, so that's nice. And now I can't switch weapons anymore either, so that's not good. Let's see what happens if I try this with the server. So I'm gonna pick up a weapon. Okay, so for the server it's actually working. And I can switch weapons and they can actually fire. So let's try an ammo pickup, and that's actually working as well. So I have 15 in 20, so that should be 25 in 30. And now it should put some other bullets in the clip. So there's going to be 7 in the clip, so there's going to be 13, so 43. There we go. Okay, so for the server it's working at least. So I'm gonna have a look and see what's wrong, and I'll be back in a sec. Okay, this shouldn't be too bad, I think. So if we go into our hero base character, so for the weapon inventory size, we're setting this as the server, but we did not set this to replicate. So there's 2 things we can do. We can either drag it in front of the branch, or we can make it replicated. So since I'm going to keep this a static value for now, I'm simply going to put it in front of the branch. There's no need to replicate it. So now all instances of the player will know the actual correct size of the inventory, so that should make it work a whole lot better. So let's launch again, and this time I'm not going to reset the profile. So the previous time I picked up the assault rifle, so that should still be in our inventory. So let's see, I'm gonna go to the select weapons, and in here, so there's actually a primary weapon in here now, and I can equip that if I want to. But I'm not gonna do that because then it's a little bit harder to test everything. So we're gonna go into the level with just a pistol. And now hopefully this works for the client as well. So I can't switch weapons, I only have one, that should be good. And I'm picking up the rifle, and this time it actually seems to be working. So I can still switch weapons, that's good as well. So if I pick up another assault rifle, I will simply get the ammo that's inside of there. So that's working as well. And I can also pick up the ammo pickups. So I think we pretty much fixed it by just fixing that one variable. So that wasn't too bad. Okay, so we have everything covered for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, and I'll be back soon for more. Talk to you later, guys. Bye bye.